Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Crucible Bootcamp. I'm your host, KeenKoala, and today's going to be a little different style of review. We're going to be going over some mental game stuff. So we're going to be focusing mainly on two concepts. The first is called scrub mentality, and the second is one most people are familiar with, and that's dealing with tilt. So in the background, I'm going to be having some of my own gameplay playing. It's going to be about a short 20-minute talk, so kind of get you guys understand what's gonna happen this time. But primarily the focus is going to be on the two subjects at hand. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's talk about scrub mentality first. So scrub mentality is different than what a lot of people think. Most people think of us when they think of a scrub, they think of someone that is new or bad at the game per se. They aren't necessarily like a strong or a good player, but that's not correct. A scrub actually is a person that decides to take a suboptimal route for winning and then blames it all on the fact that they aren't using whatever happens to be the best at that particular given moment in time. So this comes from an idea by a guy named David Sirlin. He wrote a book called Playing to Win, and if you're watching this on YouTube, all the links to all this will be in the description. And I wrote basically an article on a commentary on how playing to win and scrub mentality lines up with Destiny. So that article will be linked there as well. But it's an idea that you think that you have a moral superiority. It's basically a moral superiority complex that you're too good to use something, right? So in this case, we're gonna think about the meta, right? So the meta game, or the game within the game, and the game within the game is players, when they play a game, tend to value maximum efficiency over fun at a competitive level. So there's two different mindsets that you can get into. The first is a playing to win mindset, and the second is a playing for fun mindset. And there's different things that are okay with each mindset. So the playing to win mindset is the one that you wouldn't be scrub mentality. Scrub mentality would be you want to win, but you want to use things that are fun. And then you complain when the things that you try and use for fun aren't good enough. So an example of this is you really like fusion rifles, right? I really like fusion rifles too, but the fact of the matter is at a very high competitive level, we're talking like sweats here, not necessarily trials, but in sweats, you're better off using something like a sniper or a shotgun over a fusion rifle, because the weaknesses of a fusion rifle can be exploited. Now, if you're just using it for fun and you don't expect to win, then that isn't a big deal at all, pretty much ever. But it's when you think that you're using a suboptimal loadout, so you deserve to win. That idea that you deserve something, that because you're not using what is considered the best, that suddenly you have a level of moral superiority over all of your opponents, which is just wrong, quite frankly. There's nothing wrong with using what's considered the best, and if you want to win, and you're in a mindset that you're playing to win, you should be using the best tools that you have available to you. You wouldn't go to dig up a hole and your tool would be a spoon, right? If you're going to dig a hole in the ground, then you're going to want a shovel or an excavator or something that's going to move a lot of dirt very quickly, very easily, right? You don't want to make it hard on yourself. You don't want to sit there for weeks trying to dig up this hole that you're trying to dig up with a tiny, ice cream spoon or something. You would rather use a shovel. So that's scrub mentality. Is the scrub uses the spoon to dig the hole. You use that fusion rifle, you use that low rate of fire auto rifle, and then you complain when something like the last word or a grasp or someone using a matador, they're just ruining your day, because the tools that you chose to perform the job that you want to do just aren't very effective. So this is a mindset that a lot of players get into. And now don't confuse the idea that that these other suboptimal guns are somehow like bad. Like you shouldn't use them at all. But it's okay to use things that, you know, aren't considered the best. But you can't be in the mindset that you're going to use them and expect to win, right? And if you do win, you shouldn't rub it in the face of your opponents. And if you don't win, then you shouldn't blame it on your opponents for using whatever's best. It's you making that decision. It's you deciding that, hey, I don't want to necessarily use the best whatever. I don't want to use a Last Word. I don't want to use an Iasuna. I don't want to use a Grasp or a Hacksaw or whatever it happens to be. I would rather stay in my my other loadout. Now, when you play for fun, it doesn't matter the outcome. If you're truly playing for fun, it doesn't matter what happens at the end of the game, because the whole purpose is to have fun, right? The whole purpose is that you're going to go into the game, you're going to screw around, maybe you'll die, maybe you won't, maybe you'll win the game, maybe you won't, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is for you to enjoy the time that you're spending playing that game. And that's something that when you play for fun, people don't get into that mindset because they get super into whatever they're trying to do, right? They get super into laser focused on, you know, I need to win or I need to do whatever I can in order to beat my opponents, instead of focusing on, hey, I want to use, you know, a low rate of fire auto rifle this game because I like them. Like, this is my favorite gun. I know it's not the best gun, but I enjoy using it. So I'm just going to use it and enjoy my time that I have using it. That's not scrub mentality. And that's perfectly fine to play for fun. In fact, you should be playing for fun. This is a game after all. We are all playing a game and we're sharing this experience together. And you don't necessarily have to take out your poor experiences on other players. But what you shouldn't do is obviously be upset that someone is using the meta when you're trying to have fun, because it doesn't matter what the opponent is ever doing if you're in a playing for fun kind of mindset. Ever. Yeah, it can be frustrating when you die over and over again and you want to be successful with your fun loadout, but you can still use that as an opportunity to challenge yourself and not necessarily worry about the end results. So that kind of ties in a little bit with dealing with tilt. And we're going to go back to scrim mentality later, but dealing with tilt is something that a lot of players ask me about. Like, well, how do you deal with tilt? You know, how do you deal with when you get frustrated and things don't seem to go your way? How do you, not let yourself get super emotional? So there's a couple things that I do in order to help combat tilt. The first is I start out every game in that mindset of, am I playing this game to win? Or am I playing it to have fun? So I instantly, before the game even starts off, I decide right away, do I want to have fun or do I want to try really hard and win? As soon as I've decided that, and I've made that decision, I'm going to try really hard to win. Then I'm going to put out on a loadout that complements that. So for my case, I'm probably going to use something like Last Word Sniper, or I'm going to use a sidearm and a pulse rifle, or I'm going to use a hand cannon and a shotgun. I'm going to figure out, the best way for me to play, and I'm going to try my heart out. Now, if I'm playing for fun, then I'm going to, put on whatever I want. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to, skate in the enemy team, try to get as many melee kills as I can. Whatever I want to do that might be fun to me in that instance. And yeah, I'll still win a game here or there, or maybe I'll win a lot of games, but the purpose for me is never necessarily winning. So what happens when I'm playing for fun and things start going downhill, right? And I start getting emotional. Like, I'm trying to have fun, but it's not fun when I'm just dying over and over again and I'm not finding success with the things that I'm using. Well, when that happens, you have to take a step back and decide, how you need to deal with the situation at hand and not let it get to you. Because if you let it get to you, then you're truly, in the thick of scrub mentality. If you're trying to have fun and then you get upset because you're losing, then your whole goal was never to have fun. If you're upset that you're losing, the goal was never to have fun. The goal was always to win. And so you have to understand that and be able to break yourself off of that. Like, if you start dying a lot, just, shrug it off, laugh it off. It's no big deal, because that's not the purpose. And hopefully you're doing this with other people. Hopefully you're doing this with a group of people or with your friends, and you can all just chat and shoot the breeze and all that stuff. Like, you need to create a low stress environment for yourself in these in situations where you want to play to win or play to have fun. So let's say now So breaking yourself off is the first step. Now the second step is everyone deals with tilt a little bit differently. And it has a lot to do with anger management. So if you're not familiar with anger management, it's basically just a way to accept the emotion as it comes and then figure out how to healthily deal with it. Now, the important thing there is how to healthy, right? Healthy. You got to be healthy about dealing with it. That doesn't mean you're taking out your emotions on other players. That doesn't mean you're, dragging yourself down into the mud. Dealing with emotions is either something you learn or you don't. And if you don't learn, you got to figure out ways in order how to deal with them. Now, some people, when they get really upset, they let their anger kind of get the best of them, and they start making poor decisions, and they can't think straight, and they can't, then they get more and more frustrated because they're not performing how they expect to, and you tend to spiral down, right? Everyone has specific things that they do as they spiral out of control. So, for me personally, I start whining a lot when I start getting tilted, and then it turns to complaining, and eventually it turns into shouting. So that's kind of, if I continue to whine and I continue to complain and then I start shouting, I know that I'm on full tilt, right? And so what I do personally is I'll stop everything completely, and I'll either take the entire game off, or I'll take some time off, maybe an hour, maybe a day, maybe a week. It depends on how upset you are about everything. But I accept that it's okay to be upset, right? It's always okay to be upset. But what it isn't okay to do is to take it out on yourself, or to take it out on your teammates, because every situation you have some level of control over, and you always have control over your emotions. Learning how to deal with keeping them in check is the hard part, but you always have the ability to say, no, I don't need to be upset about this, or make a conscious effort that, I don't need to let this affect me negatively. I can turn this into a learning experience. I can turn this into a positive experience. Instead of complaining every time that someone kills me, I can congratulate the other player, even though they can't hear me. Just saying, hey, good shot, good snipe, or just, talking out your mistakes. I shouldn't have been there. Trying to figure out what you could have done differently for the next time. That way you can stop continuing to create these situations where you're failing, and try to work on creating situations where you're succeeding, or even giving yourself a chance to succeed. If you get into a situation and you make a mistake, right? You did all the right things. You did the backpedaling, you had your last word out, you were putting shots on your target, and one shot misses and they just shotgun you, right? But you did everything right until that point. You can consider that a success. If you did everything right that you thought was right, and you still ended up failing because of a game mechanic, or your aim wasn't quite there, the fact that you went through the motions successfully, in your mind you should chalk that up to a win, and you should take those wins. They're not. You shouldn't just say it because you want the free win, or you want to feel good about whatever you did, but you should recognize that your failures are opportunities to learn and to grow. Every failure is an opportunity to learn and to grow. But you have to make that choice. You can't decide that, and you have to decide in that moment, how are you going to deal with that situation? Are you going to let it eat at you, and just, you're just going to let it sit there and peck away at you, and eventually you're going to go through that spiral again, where you start tilting and you get more and more upset, and then all of a sudden you're yelling again, and you don't want to play the game anymore because it's not fun, right? The whole purpose is, you want to have fun. You want to have good experiences, but you didn't take the necessary steps to change those poor experiences into positive experiences. So now let's move backpedal a little bit. So let's combine tilt with scrub mentality, right? So now we're in the thick of scrub mentality. We're using our fun loadout. We're getting really upset, and we're just, we're going on tilt. Recognizing what's going on is the first step, right? Recognize what's happening, because if you don't recognize what's happening, you're not going to have any control over the situation, and again, it's going to spiral out of control. So recognition is the first thing. And then say to yourself, hey, Koala, you're tilting. So, if you have to say it out loud, just be like, hey, you're getting really upset right now. Mute your mic. pull yourself off comms, step back from the game for a second, wait out the whole res timer, just breathe, you know, do whatever it takes for you personally to calm yourself down. Now, everybody's different. For me, like deep breathing, and there's something I learned called deep relaxation, where it's a technique that you do. You know, you lay down and you relax, and you focus on relaxing individual muscle groups. Right now, this isn't something you would do in a game, but it's a very basic form of meditation. So you can just take that deep breath and focus, you know, on your chest, and you just want to relax your chest. So all you do is you close your eyes and you just, you know, I'm relaxing my chest and I'm focusing on my breathing. That's it. That's all you're doing. You're not focusing on the last engagement you got in that failed. You're not focusing on how everything is going wrong. You're not focusing on, you know, how awful of a shot you have right now. All you're focusing on is relaxing your body and turning off your mind. Because when you go on a tilt, your mind's going at full tilt, right? It's going full bore all the way to the wall. It's not going to stop. Like, it's a train that has to crash, right? And it's crashing right before your eyes and you can't stop it. Well, the way you stop it is by turning it off, right? And you just do that by changing your focus completely. And so that's one, for me, that's one way that helps me out, is that just taking a second, waiting out the res timer, you know, closing my eyes and just picking something. Maybe you have to pick a happy thought. Like, that sounds really corny, but if you pick something that relaxes you, or a memory that relaxes you, and just focus on that for 10 seconds. And then when you open your eyes, you know, you've accepted whatever happened, right? And accept that it doesn't have to happen again. If you don't want it to. Maybe that means you avoid getting into situations where you're putting yourself into harm's way so you can lose an engagement. Maybe that just means you stick by a teammate and team fire for the rest of the game. Or maybe it means you just deal with that situation again and you just take this opportunity that, yeah, this guy that's killing you over and over and over again is really good, right? But you can take this opportunity to learn how to deal with someone that's very good, that's just punishing you every time you want to do something. And if you do that, then you turn into a learning experience. So you say to yourself, yeah, like, this guy's really good, but I'm going to take this as an opportunity to learn how to do X, Y, or Z against a really good player. And I don't need to worry about anything. I can just focus on this one moment to learn how to be successful. And that way, as you fail, and you will fail, and you'll fail a lot, and that's okay, you won't take it as you're doing poorly or you aren't good enough. You're more taking it as an opportunity to figure out how to do it right the next time. And you get a little bit better every time, as long as you're focusing on improvement and not success, right? Because the success will come eventually. If you're doing it right over and over and over again, eventually, you know, your mind or your body will catch up. Or you'll realize that this is a limitation for you. And then comes another, basically the final thing that happens, and that's acceptance. And accepting wherever you are and whatever the situation is for what it is. So in situations where you're just getting outgunned by the same guy over and over and over again, and there's really nothing you feel like you can do about it, then you have to accept that maybe at this moment, this is your cap. Like, this is your limitation. You can't get any better than this. This guy just has your number. And that's okay. Now that you know this guy just has your number, then you can take steps to avoid said guy, right? You don't have to engage him anymore. You don't have to try to do the same thing over and over again. And sometimes it's important when you are dying and practicing the same thing over and over again, that maybe that thing that you're practicing, it isn't the proper way to approach the situation. And that's another thing you can learn, is as you're trying to figure out the best way to do something, and you say to yourself, you know, I have pushed this person with a shotgun straight forward and won with my Juggernaut shield every single time it's been up, every single game. And now this person that I'm pushing, I can never do it. Maybe that tells you that against good players, a push like that won't work. Ever, really, right? If it says that, hey, this push that's happening is never going to work, period, then you can go back into your normal games, or when you play against lesser players or players that aren't quite as skilled as you, and you can think to yourself, hey, Now I know what my limitations are for different skill levels. Now I know against good players, I can't do this push head on with Juggernaut because they're going to jump over me or they're going to bait me and they're going to deal with that shield and I'm just going to die every single time. And then other times you can notice, hey, these players aren't so great. They aren't so great at being pushed. I can go back into that mode where I can push them straight forward because they don't know how to deal with me. And knowing when something works and when something doesn't happens because you learned where those limitations are, because you could properly manage your tilt and you could properly manage your failures and turning them into situations where it's an opportunity to learn and to grow, as opposed to an opportunity to get frustrated and, you know, let it get to you, really. So that's pretty much some very basic things on scrub mentality and how I personally deal with tilt and how I would encourage you to deal with tilt as well. Everyone works a little bit differently, but the main things you want to focus on scrub mentality are understanding, are you playing to win? Are you playing to have fun? Accepting the situations as they come along, and then making sure you don't spiral out of control. That spiral out of control is the most important thing, and everybody spirals differently. Some people, they get really quiet, right? They don't talk anymore. They don't do call outs. They kind of silently seethe. Some people are like that. Some people are very vocal. Some people, you know, get physical, like they throw things, they punch walls. There's a whole spectrum of the ways people deal with their anger. But understanding what those triggers are for you and how you spiral out of control and then stopping it. And finally, there's a concept in Latin, it's called agere contra, which means to go against or to do the opposite. So a good thing that you do when you're spiraling out of control and you're going to tilt is just to do the opposite of what you would normally do. So like I said before, if your normal inclination is to yell or to shout or to get upset and whine, then the opposite would be to congratulate your opponent, to encourage them to do better, to say what a great job they did, and to get break yourself of that pattern where you know you're just going to get completely out of control. So hopefully that helps you guys out. I mean, that's pretty much all I had for you guys this time. Very short, but I feel like we're going to do more of these mental level up kind of talks on different subjects. We're going to go more deeper into detail in all these things with more specific examples as we go along. But this is a good way for you because the game isn't all physical. A lot of games are mental, and so understanding how to up your mental game really helps out. Really helps you out physically, because if you're mentally stressed, then you start showing physical symptoms of stress, right? But if you're stressed, but you learn how to deal with that, and you can calmly, you know, relax and control the the adrenaline that's running through your body, then that's gonna help you physically. So they go hand in hand. But thank you guys for watching this time. I've been your host, KeenKoala. As usual, if you want to submit me any kind of gameplay, you can send it to keen@cruciblebootcamp.com. Again, I don't do 6s, and if you're super sweaty or competitive, I don't do 4s because they're basically the same thing. But any 3s, skirmish salvage, rumble, trials, elimination, any of that, custom games included, you can send them to me. I'll review them, tell you what you're doing wrong, tell you how you can improve, and send you on your way. Hopefully you can take that knowledge in order to get better. And if you want to support the stream, you can always become a Patreon backer. It's basically the same as a Twitch sub. There's some extra stuff if you want to support more. It's a way to crowdfund. You are under no obligation to do this. I really appreciate this, and all the funds go towards anything that the stream does. So any of the bills that are associated with streaming or putting on the show production, and most importantly, everything extra goes towards my wedding. So you actively help me get married next year, which I really appreciate. And the way we're going, it looks like it's going to be a really fun time for my fiance / future wife. So thank you for support if you are. But if not, again, I've been your host, KeenKoala. This has been Crucible Bootcamp, and class is dismissed. I'll see you guys next time.